Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing fine. And guys, today we are going to discuss one of the most important topics in Unit 2 Teaching Aptitude, which is learning and teaching approaches and theories. Well, in this particular session, you might get one question based on that, and no wonder if they ask two questions also. So pay attention, it's quite important session that you have to understand. Anyway, all right, let's chat about some teaching and learning theories you need to know for your exam, right? So honestly, there are like a ton of these theories out there, but let's stick to the ones you are most likely to bump into your test, right? And think of them as the greatest hits of educational theories. Right. So as you can see over your screen, we have the list of the theories which are important in your exam perspective. So I have listed down here and we're going to discuss thoroughly about every single theories, right? So first off, we have got like Dale's cone of experience. It's a cool visual way to understand different types of learning experiences. Then we have like Bloom's taxonomy, which is like a ladder of thinking skills from remembering stuff all the way up to creating new ideas, right? Next, we have Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence. He said we are smart in different ways. Like some of us are word smart, some of us are like music, and so on. We'll discuss more about it in our next slide. Anyway, next, we have Piaget's theory of cognitive development. It's all about how kids think and learn as they grow up, right? And he broke it down into stages, and these stages we also gonna cover, right? And then there is John B. Watson, who you might have heard about, that scientific theory of behaviorism, right? And he was all about observing behavior and saying, that's kind of learning that student or learner has to learn. Anyway, then we have very important BF Skinner's operant conditioning, and in this exam they ask question based on that. So in that way, it this particular topic becomes even more important for you guys, right? And it's like a training pet. Do something good and get a treat, right? And we'll talk about this reinforcement and all the punishment stuff, right? Then we have Pavlov classical conditioning, which is also very important, and it's all about his dogs. And the kind of, you just rang the bell and then feed the dog, and soon what happened, just ringing the bell made them drool, right? It's all about learning through association, right? Then we'll talk about John Dewey's progressive education. They ask question based on that. That's what I have mentioned here. So he thought school should be more about real life stuff, less about boring lectures, right? Then we also talk about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, ZPD, very important. And it's all about like sweet spot of learning, not too easy, not too hard, but just right with a little help. So these are the big theories that you should keep an eye for your exam, right? And they are not just educational jargon, they really help in understanding how we learn and teach, right? So as you can see over your screen, we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy. Very important, and every time they ask question based on that. And sometime in different shift they ask other theories, but this is that you have to stick around. You have to get all the, nitty gritty about this particular topic. Anyway, so Bloom's taxonomy is a pretty cool concept, and that was actually introduced by Benjamin Bloom and his educator friends, right? And back in 1950s. Think of it as a toolbox that helps teachers frame their teaching goals and decide how to challenge their students effectively. It's like having a roadmap for learning, making sure educators can cover all the bases, from simple recall of facts to making complex judgments, right? So here's the scoop on Bloom's taxonomy. Let me tell you, it breaks down learning objective into three main categories. First is cognitive, that is all about thinking. So whenever this word comes, cognitive, think about it, the brain, right? Think about the learning. So in that keyword, you will understand when they ask question based on that. Then we have like affective, which is like focused on feelings. And then we have psychomotor, which deals with physical skills. And in 1956, Bloom and his team published this whole framework in a book, basically setting the stage for future educators to plan their lessons more thoughtfully, right? And as you know, this named after the main man, Bloom himself. And this taxonomy isn't just a fancy set of educational terms, it's a practical guide for teachers to shape the way they ask questions, right, and present information in class. It's like a recipe for creating engaging and effective learning experience. Bloom and his collaborators devised a framework that encompassed six major categories. As you can see over your screen, we have knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, evaluation. We're gonna talk about it one by one. So, first we have knowledge level. And what do you understand by this particular thing? So let's dive into the first level of this taxonomy, right? And picture a teacher in a classroom, right, trying to figure out if the kids have got the basic facts down. It's all about checking if students can remember and recognize the stuff they have been taught. For example, a teacher might ask, hey, what countries were throwing punches in the war of 1812? Or can you list three kinds of rice that people commonly eat? So, what is it? It's not just about knowing stuff, but understanding the what and where and how of things, right? And this level is super important because it lays the groundwork for all the learning that follows. It's like making sure you know the ingredients before you start, your cooking meal, right? And by ensuring students have this base level of knowledge, teachers can then build on this, moving to more complex tasks like applying this knowledge in real life situations or analyzing information to solve problems, right? So in everyday life we use the knowledge level all the time, right? Suppose when you memorize a phone number, right, learn the rules of a game or remember the steps in a recipe, you're operating this at this level. So you should remember that. And it's the foundation for more complex thinking and doing both in school and beyond. So next we're going to talk about what comprehension level. Very important. And think of this comprehension level like organizing your closet, right? You need to know what you have, right? What the facts you understand or the ideas, and then you need to sort them out in a way that makes sense, like organizing, summarizing, translating, all this stuff, right? Let's say you read a book like easy handbook on NTA NET Paper 1. So after reading it, your task is to pull out the critical facts, almost like picking out the essential items from a packed closet, right? And you might be asking to summarize the key qualities of a good teacher mentioned in the book. It's like telling your friend the gist of a movie without going into every detail. You hit the highlights, which is the main points, right? So that is your comprehension level. Let's talk about next level, which is application level, right? And this is like knowing how to cook and using that skill to whip up a meal, whatever ingredient you have at hand. It's about using what you know in a new or practical ways. Say you have read the easy handbook on NTA NET Paper 1, right? The application level is where you think about how this book could change your approach to studying or teaching or clarifying your exam, right? You are using the book's content to solve a new problem, like improving your teaching methods or study habits. For example, you might be asked if reading this handbook could increase your chances of influencing positive changes in your students, or can this book help you or someone else pass the exam with flying colors? It's like using a recipe book not just to follow a recipe but to create your own dish, right? Next we have analysis level. Well, this is like being a detective and who looks at all the clues and tries to figure out how they are connected to solve a mystery, right? When you are analyzing something, you break it down into smaller parts, right? See how these parts relate to each other and try to understand the bigger picture. Let's say you have a couple of books on educational methods. At the analysis level, you're not just understanding what each book says, you're actually comparing them, seeing which one offers more benefits, or maybe finding out how they complement each other. Another example could be looking at the unemployment issue in India. You're not just stating the facts, you're digging deeper. Why is it happening? How is this population contributing to it, right? And what underlying factors are at play? It's like watching a crime show and trying to figure out the motive behind the crime, not just who did it, right? So that is your analysis level. And at the end, we have two more like synthesis and evaluation. We're gonna move to synthesis level. Well, think of this, synthesis level as being like a master chef in a kitchen. But instead of food, you're working with ideas and concepts. You're not just following a recipe or set of instructions, you're creating something new and unique. It's like taking an old recipe, like say, for example, for a rice pudding that's not so healthy, right? And swapping out ingredient to make it healthier. So you're experimenting it, right? Mixing and matching different elements to create something better. You're also understanding why these changes are healthier. For instance, using almond milk instead of regular milk or adding honey instead of sugar changes the nutrition profile. It's like creating a new dish while understanding the science behind why it's better for you. Right? I hope you get the idea. Next, we have the last one is evaluation level, and this is where you turn into a kind of judge or critic. It's like examining different types of rice and deciding which is best for making pudding, right? Is it basmati or jasmine or short grain rice, right? Or you're not just looking at what you're preferring, right? You're assessing based on criteria like texture, like flavor or health benefits. In a broader context, it's like cooking at a significant event, say the trial of war criminals in the Ukraine war, and evaluating the ethics behind these decisions, right? And it's about forming opinions and making judgments based on set standard or criteria, not just the personal preferences, right? So, guys, that was all about all different levels, right? And next we have the revised taxonomy, and which is also important because it came on 2001, and there was one question based on that also in your exam. So in that perspective, you have to understand a little bit about the revised taxonomy. What did they add extra, right? So in 2001 there was a big update to the way we think about these educational level called the revised taxonomy, right? It's kind of like a game update that adds new features, right, and makes everything more user friendly. So this update introduced two main dimensions, and can you guess what? Right, the knowledge dimension and what you do with what you know, right? The cognitive dimension. So in the knowledge dimension there are four levels like factual, conceptual, procedural and metacognitive. So all these four you have to remember, right, if they ask. But anyway, you just stick with the main five levels that we talked about, right? And the cognitive process dimension is more about actions, right? Remembering just like it sounds, or recalling facts, understanding like grasping the meaning of information, applying using what you know in new situation, analyzing breaking information into parts to explore understanding and relations, right? And then evaluating like making judgment based on criteria and standard, and creating, which is like putting element together to form a new coherent whole or make an original product, right? So originally Bloom's taxonomy was like a tool that helped teachers sort out their lesson plans and questions at different levels of complexity. But now with the revised taxonomy, it's more like a map that shows not only the terrain, which is the content, right, but also the many different paths like teaching and assessment methods you can take to explore it. For example, a teacher can use this map to plan a lesson that not only covers the facts about a historical event, which is factual knowledge, right, but also encourages students to analyze its cause and effect, which is analyzing, and at the end, what perhaps create a presentation that explores, its impact on modern society, which is your creative, right? And so, in a nutshell, these updates make teaching and learning a kind of more dynamic and interactive process, much like how a GPS system guides you through different routes depending on your current location and destination, right? As you can see over your screen, we have a diagram here. Remember, it starts from the bottom. As you can see, bottom we have remember, which is like recall facts and basic concepts, right? Then understand, like explain ideas or concepts. It can be like description or discussion or explanation, identification, all this stuff, right? Then apply. So how you're gonna use this information to apply in different contexts, like use information in new situations, like execute, implement, solve. Then we have like analyze, and what happens here, you draw connection among ideas, like differentiate, organize, relate. And then we have evaluate, which is like justify a stand or decision. And at the end, you create a new product, right? You create something new, you produce new or original work, like design, assemble, or construct, conjecture, and develop, right? And all this PPT you'll get in the description box, or if you want a more slides, like all 10 units we have already in our app that you can enroll. But anyway, that was all about Bloom's taxonomy, guys. Next we're gonna talk about very important Dale's cone of experience, and in exam they have asked question based on that, so that's why we have put it here. So our educator Edgar Dale back in 1946 came up with something pretty cool called the learning pyramid, also known as the cone of experience. He even tweaked it a bit in 1954 and again in 1969. Right? So what Dale did was pretty groundbreaking for audio visual learning. Right? He laid out a way to figure out how different types of media can help us learn. People got a bit mixed up about what his cone was really saying, and we'll talk about it, right? So you might have heard about the cone of learning, right? So it's this diagram that claims to show how much we remember based on how we learn stuff, right? It's been like shared and reshared so many times, and each time it seems to take on a life of its own, right? The idea is simple. We remember 10% of what we read. Like when you skim through a textbook, you only get 10% of it, right? Then there is 20% of what we hear. Like if you're just listening to a lecture without any visual, right? So if we bump it up to 30%, that's for our stuff we see, like watching a demo or something in action. So as you can see,